Hello and welcome to Mostly Sapphic Books, where I am on a mission to read every single book about lesbians. Today we're talking about two new releases which have a lot in common. They are both gay medieval comedy sequels that are sadder than the first installation in the series. We're talking about One Night Stand by Amie Kaufman and Meagan Spooner, the sequel to Ladies' Night, and we're talking about Bridget and Gabe Are Not Okay by Lex Croucher, the sequel to Gwen and Art Are Not in Love. If you like either of these books, you should read the other. They're both good series. I think in one series I like the first book more, and in another series I like the second book more. So like they're both good, and like they have a lot of weirdly similar themes and also like characters and like plot lines. Coincidentally, they're not like that similar. I'm not accusing anyone of plagiarism here, but like they just have a lot in common, and I really liked both of them. So if you like one, you should read the other for sure. The Lex Croucher series is just these two books, just this duology, whereas the Amie Kaufman and Meagan Spooner series, there is going to be a third book. So it's kind of different in that one of these series isn't completed yet. But for right now, they both have two books. And in this video, I'm mainly going to be talking about the sequels. I did a video on Ladies' Night last year when I read that. That was one of my favorite books of 2025. Definitely one of my favorite 2025 releases, but also just one of the best books I read in 2025. Gwen and Art Are Not in Love, I read a couple of years ago when it was first published. It wasn't published that long ago, but it was before I started my channel, and so I don't have a video on that. And I also didn't remember it as well. But we'll get to that when we get to that book. I'm going to start with One Night Stand by Amie Kaufman and Meagan Spooner. So a quick summary of the series if you haven't read it. This is about a princess. She is put up as a prize for a night tournament. Whoever wins this tournament joust, gets to take home the princess as the prize, her hand in marriage. And she doesn't want that, and so she conspires with a lady knight who is secretly in the competition. It's not for women. Women aren't supposed to be knights, but she joins this competition, and she is going to help the princess, not have to marry a strange man that she does not want to marry. And then they fall in love. It is super funny. It is so unserious. There's an omniscient narrator narrating this. We have both girls' point of views, but we also have an omniscient sort of godlike fairy tale narrator who's telling you this story as if it's like a written down fairy tale. That narrator is so funny and is like this omniscient being and makes like 21st century jokes, totally breaks the fourth wall, addresses you, the reader. It's so unique and it's so funny and it's so like tongue-in-cheek, and it just does not take itself seriously at all. And that's the best part about it. It's so refreshing. Just tonally, comedically, it's very funny. There's nothing really quite like it that I've read. And that was what made it one of my absolute favorite books of 2025. I love that first book. Ladies' Night, incredible. Everyone should read that if you like comedies. This sequel is not very funny because it's about PTSD. At the end of the first book, they fight a dragon, and fighting a dragon is scary, and it reasonably gives the knight PTSD, and so she's pretty traumatized. And that's just not funny. It doesn't lend itself to comedy very well. She also doesn't really want to talk about her experience fighting this dragon. Everyone sees her as this hero. She gets unmasked as a lady knight in the first book by the end of it, but now she's the lady knight who slayed the dragon, and so they accept her, and she's this big hero, but she's also carrying around the secret burden of, oh my god, fighting that dragon was so scary, and I almost, like, didn't win, and, like, they're hailing me as this hero. I do not deserve this. I'm not that heroic. And so she's struggling, and she's also not communicating with her girlfriend because she doesn't want to seem weak. She wants to be the big strong knight protecting her princess, and she doesn't feel like that, but she keeps trying to save face and pretend like she is, but the princess can clearly tell that there's sort of an emotional rift between them. They're not gelling quite as well. The knight seems to be keeping secrets. The princess is also keeping a secret because she's sort of being disowned by her family for not marrying a man and like continuing their bloodline. She's gallivanting around England. Do they live in England? I forget where they live actually. Maybe it's like a made up fairy tale, European land, whatever. They're gallivanting around, trying to find legendary monsters. People keep saying, oh my god, there was a dragon. Supposedly the dragons were all extinct, but one came back, And now there's all these other monsters, like sea monsters and random monsters in the woods. You have to come and fight these monsters for us. And so they've been going around to all of these cities and fighting these monsters, but it's always just like a wolf in the woods, and it's never actually that scary. So that also makes the knight feel inadequate. Like, she's not actually doing anything. She's got this reputation as this big dragon slayer. She's going around hunting these monsters, but like, not really. Not really. And the princess is trying to get in contact with her parents to get her own inheritance. Maybe she thinks if she goes around England as this knight's companion, her parents will be proud of her and they'll just give her her dowry and she won't have to be married in order to get access to her money, and then they can live independently. They can make their own lives as this lesbian couple. And her parents aren't going for it, and so they're both like keeping these secrets and feeling sad and depressed that their life isn't working out. And it's not very funny. It's just not funny. And that was so sad because I really, really wanted this to be funny because the first book was so funny. It was so funny. There were so many like fourth wall breaks and like 21st century references. I feel like I forget everything. You can go watch that first video. I remembered a few things in that one. There's scenes of them like at the joust tournament and they're eating like 21st century fair food. I feel like they have like the Korean mozzarella corn dogs or something at one point. Or like weird fried food that we eat at a state fair that would not have been around at these medieval jousting tournaments. The jousting tournament gets overrun by like advertising, and the knights start wearing jersey with like logos of different brands from around the country on it. It's so funny and like so 21st century unserious, and it's incredible. And the second book wasn't that at all. It is a little bit. It is a little bit. I'll give it that. The narrator was my favorite character in the second book for sure because the narrator is still funny. The narrator is still this omniscient being that breaks the fourth wall and is not impacted by the story, cannot experience PTSD, and is therefore the same character from the first book, and is sort of trying to be funny and is sort of trying to play the comedic, comedy, lighthearted role here. But the whole thing used to be funny, and I wanted the whole thing to be funny again. And it wasn't funny, and so this was so disappointing. And it's not a bad book, but I was so disappointed. It had such big shoes to fill. Like, my expectations were up here off the screen. They were up here. You can't even see how high I'm holding my hand up. And so while this wasn't a bad book, the whole time I was just thinking, I'm so disappointed that this isn't as incredible as that first book was. That first book is something special, dude. Holy hell. And the difference in tone wasn't my only problem with this. That sort of storyline where they're going to different cities and investigating different mysteries, that's sort of like backstory. It sort of happened in between the events of the first book and the second book. We get sort of like a wrap up of that time. Like, this is what they have been doing, and it is not very fulfilling. The actual sort of plot of this book starts kind of late. I feel like it's around 30 to 40, maybe not 40. It takes a little while for like the actual sort of plot of this book to happen, which is they go to another city to investigate another claim. There's like a sorceress in a tower, or it's like a ghost sorceress, a dead sorceress. So they go to this town and they're investigating this one mystery for most of the book. I like that conceptually. It could have been more fun if it was like a cozy comedy and we're going around meeting all the people of this town, the inhabitants, and they're all kind of quirky and funny. We meet a few people, they make some friends, they have some old friends with them. I remember there's a plotline with a member of the royal guard, or like one of the princess's handmaidens, who like clearly is some kind of advanced spy or something, and we don't really know what's going on with her in the first book, but we can tell that she has some very, very interesting backstory. We get some more of that here, and it wasn't as interesting as I was hoping it would be after reading that first book. So that was a little disappointing. I wasn't like charmed. It wasn't like a charming, found family, cozy fantasy vibe when they get to this town. It's just like, it's kind of a mystery about what's really going on here with the Sorceress Tower. It tries to tie in a few things from the first book. At the end of the first book, we meet some witches. There actually is a monster. There's a sea monster. We know that from like a flash forward at the very beginning of the book. So there's plenty of elements here. I think it takes a little while to get going, and I just think it wasn't as good as it could have been, because I know how incredible that first book was. That first book was amazing. And this was just good. And I was so sad about it. And it makes sense that they have PTSD because they did fight a scary dragon. Like, all of these, like, sad plot lines make sense. But it's just not what I wanted because the first book was so funny. And I imagine that anyone who loved the first book really liked that funny tone and then wanted it in the second book. And so, like, no one wants this. No one wanted it. Normally, I'd praise a book for doing, like, a PTSD plot because I think in a lot of books and movies, like, we see our heroes in life or death situations and then they just succeed and then they move on to an even more harrowing life or death situation and they just move on like nothing happened. So the PTSD plotline is more realistic, but it's not as fun. And this was like my fun, silly medieval fantasy lesbian princess knight book. Why do they have PTSD? But I'm hoping they work through some of that. They communicate in this book. By the end of it, I'm hoping the third book is funnier. I want the third book to be funny again. Be funny again. Do the jokes. I want more silliness. Go, like, outlandish with it. The outrageousness, the audacity of just, like, committing to a bit of that first book was so good and so refreshing and so different and so fun. And I want it again. Do it again. I'm whining. So this book was fine. I don't think it was the best version of the story it could have been. Could have been tighter. The miscommunication trope where the girls were just, like, not communicating their own individual problems with each other, that's, like, not that fun to read about, especially when you're expecting it to be a super funny book. So this was just fine. It was fine. It was not incredible like the first book. It's good. And I still want to read the third book. And also the covers are beautiful. I think I like maybe the second cover even more because there's, like, the sea monster tentacles around the border. It's fun. I kind of like the colors of the first book more. The pink, it really pops. But I like the nautical vibe of the second one more. So I want to see the third cover. These are beautiful covers. I would have them physical copies as display pieces if I ever find some old cheap used copies somewhere or something. I'd get my hands on these. They're very beautiful. A+ on the cover design. B in execution. Let's give it a B. And that first book was like A++, S tier. It got over 100% on its tests. It was an overachiever. What an academic success, and now it's just a B student. There's so many B students, it doesn't stand out as much. Get back to that A. We can do it. Amie Kaufman and Meagan Spooner. Get to that A again, you could do it. Now moving on to Bridget and Gabe Are Not Okay. This is the sequel to Gwen and Are Not in Love, which came out, I want to say, like, 2024, possibly 2023, I think 2024. So I read it, like, when it came out, as I don't remember it, and this was hurt a little bit by me not remembering what happened, but I picked up enough, or I remembered enough, or it tells you enough, it rehashes enough that I could follow this just fine, and I wasn't totally lost or anything. But it took me a minute to get my bearings again. So a brief summary of this world. In Gwen and Are Not in Love, Gwen and her brother Gabriel are prince and princess of Camelot. It's very like King Arthur of the Round Table, all that kind of jazz. Gwen is sort of engaged to be married to this knight called Arthur. But Arthur is in love with the brother Gabriel, and Gwen is in love with a lady knight named Bridget. And so both the siblings are gay, and their love interest is gay. Everybody's gay. I don't remember what happens in the first book. There's sort of romance shenanigans where they're, like, all getting to know each other and, like, kind of courting and flirting and realizing that, they don't want their arranged marriages, and, like, the political shenanigans of you have to marry this person and have an heir, and they're, like, not into that because they're pretty gay. At some point in the first book, their father dies. The king dies. I think this is at the end. At the end, there's a big battle scene where some cultists try to overthrow the king. I believe the king dies in that battle, but the king's people are victorious, and in the second book, now Gabe is king. But would you believe it? The sequel is also about PTSD. Now, these books aren't as funny as Lady Night was, because Lady Night's it's just off the charts, man. It's just incredible. But Gwen and Art are not in love. That's a funny book. Like, the tone's comedic, you know, it's lighthearted. And this actually does a good job of staying on the same level. It never reaches the highs of Ladies' Night, but it never reaches the lows of One Night Stand. And so I think, like, overall as a series, more consistent and still very good. I will say that the audiobook narrators, I think whoever was directing this audiobook was holding a gun to their head and telling them that they weren't allowed to be funny. Cause like they were good narrators. They would do like accents. Every once in a while some of the comedy would slip in. And I'm like, oh, you're a good narrator. You could have done this book really well. And they were both middling. I don't know. They both gave kind of a weird performance. It got better as it went on, but I feel like the director straight up, right off the bat, told them, your characters are sad. And then they weren't allowed to deviate from that at all. There were so many times where I'd be like, oh, that line was really funny. Incredible how Bridget's voice actress read it without an ounce of mirth. I'm like, how'd she do that? That takes skill to not read these funny lines in a funny way at all. But sometimes the comedy would slip in, and sometimes that was from side characters. So I really think they were like really committed to your character is sad. Yes, they're using comedy. Yes, they are explicitly saying in the text that they are using humor to deflect from their feelings, but you have to read it sad. Don't you put any joy into that performance. Don't you dare do it. So I would recommend this book via text and not the audiobook. The audiobook's okay. It gets better as it goes on. The boy narrator, he picked up on the comedy a little sooner than the girl narrator did. I'm so sorry I forget their names. So when I started this book, and they were talking about PTSD reasonably, Gabe lost his arm in the fight. His dad died. Bridget was also in the fight, and she's got like PTSD around like the battle and like the armor and blood, and you know, reasonably they all have PTSD. They were literally in a fight for their lives and almost died, and were like horrifically injured and are now having like panic attacks and, you know, sort of flashbacks to that time, and like reasonably they have PTSD. But I'm tired of everyone having PTSD. I want my funny books. So when I started this book and everyone was sad and the audiobook narrators were really sad, I'm like, oh no, another like really sad sequel? But then again, this book is not that sad. It has moments of sadness, and like the climactic scene is actually kind of dark. But there are absolutely moments of comedy. Whether or not the audiobook narrators wanted you to know that, they're there. I had to sort of translate the audiobook in my head into the text. I'm like, oh yeah, that line would be really funny if I were reading it. Interesting choices. I don't know what was going on there. But like this was consistently as funny as the first one. It's a little sadder, but like it's pretty much on the same level. Whereas Ladies' Night was different. It was not the same level. It was not the same sort of book series really that I was expecting, and I was a little sad. But this is very consistent. So if you like that first book, you won't be disappointed by this. And I think the writing's really good. I think Lex Croucher's a really good writer. I've read not all of their books actually. I should read more Lex Croucher, but I have read another book that they wrote that is not in this series. But I've only read 3 books by them now. But I like their writing style a lot. But the main plot of this book, Gabriel is now king, and he has made a bunch of changes that people don't really like. One, gay marriage. Everybody's gay. They can get gay married now. Or, you know, it's not like illegal to be gay, mostly, except some people aren't very cool with that. They don't really love him as a king yet. He's a young king, and he is very unsure of himself. He wants to do what's best for his people, but he is grieving his father. He is injured. He is having panic attacks. He was not like prepared for this role. He feels like he's letting everyone down because he can't please everyone. He's kind of having a bad time, but like his heart's in the right place, and he's got his court of advisors with him. And he wants to go on a tour of England to help everyone and like contact people and, you know, do things for these cities, acts of charities for these cities. And his sort of court advises him to make the sort of Knights of the Round Table, basically, He invites a bunch of people he knows, including his not quite boyfriend, Arthur. They're not really together because Gabe is so focused on the king stuff that he's kind of, he's pushed the relationship stuff away off of his priority list. And he invites Gwen, the Lady Knight. Not Gwen the Lady Knight, Bridget's the Lady Knight. There's a lot of names. Gwen is his sister, she is also there. So like all of our main characters are together on this quest, and they are going around England investigating legendary mysteries like the Lady of the Lake, uh, and like the Green Knight. It's coincidentally the same plotline, except this is like the actual main plot of the book. Whereas in One Night Stand, that was sort of like the backstory, and we were really just focused on one. In this book, we see a bunch of different tales, which is like pretty fun, and it's like a good structure for the novel, like a bookend, like when they start this journey and when they end this journey, and like all these different stops along the way to sort of push the book forward, and it carries a lot of this momentum. The book is better paced than it was in One Night Stand. I think the sequel is the better sequel of the two sequels, sequentially. So we have all our favorite characters doing all these quirky little quests. And there's also not quite an omniscient narrator, but there's a sort of third point of view that interjects every once in a while, and it is the scribe who is telling these legends, writing down the history of King Gabriel and all of his heroic acts. And we sort of see them written down in this kind of like flowery, not propaganda language, but like it's made to make King Gabe look a little more elegant and regal than he is, you know? And that's kind of funny to see this sort of biased take on this adventure. And that's really fun. And that plays sort of a comedic role, just like the omniscient narrator in Ladies' Night. Again, it's completely a coincidence that these two books overlap in like these little ways. Because like they just got published at the same time. Like they're not copying each other. But I guess if you're drawing inspiration from like medieval Arthurian legend, you're gonna have a lot of the same plot lines. But it doesn't feel like identical. They definitely feel like two very separate series. But if you like one, you will like the other. So I recommend both of these. I really liked them. I don't know what I want to say that I liked more, because Ladies' Night is so good. Ladies' Night is the best book out of this bunch, by far. It's not close. I loved Ladies' Night. But like, as a series, I might have to go the Lex Croucher series. It is complete. Ladies' Night is not complete yet. So, is that a fair comparison? I don't know, but I think the Lex Croucher series was more consistent and really good. They do differ in that, there are multiple point of views in the Lex Croucher series, and one of them is the gay guys, and one of them is the lesbians. So we got a good mix of both here. There's also some fun gender happening. Bridget, the knight, at one point towards the end, she kind of cuts her hair, kind of, maybe doesn't quite see herself as like a lady knight, and just sort of wants to be with the knights. Not want to be a boy knight necessarily, but like there's some fun gender going on there, and I found that quite delicious. Tasty little gender morsels. Yes, in my butch sapphic fiction. Fun. I enjoyed Lady Knights. You probably also like Lady Knights. These are probably some of the best Lady Knight books. I should probably make like a short on Lady Knights or something. Ladies' Night is the best Lady Knight book. What are you doing tonight, ladies? I also kind of like the lesbian relationship in Bridget and Gabe Are Not Okay a little better, because it's not so much based on miscommunication. Like there is a bit where the knight doesn't want to confess to her PTSD and say that, she's having trouble being a knight now, and like fighting and like killing things and protecting the princess like she's supposed to. But I guess since only half of the book is from her point of view, it's not as emotionally draining as it is in One Night Stand, where we're kind of getting that from both point of views, where both of the lesbians are being sad and sappy. We only have one sad, sappy lesbian in this book. And again, there is more humor, so it's not like overly sad, overly sappy. So I kind of like the lesbians in this one better, even though the book is only half about them. But Ladies' Night, I don't know. I don't know why I'm like comparing, or like I'm pitting them against each other if they're not competing titles. they're two great book series. You should read both, and I like them both. And there doesn't need to be a winner here, so I don't know what I'm doing. Really, they're both winners, and I'm the winner. There's no losers here. These are two good book series, and I got to read them, and it was awesome. And I recommend them, and you can read them too. No one is losing here. That's rad as hell. And maybe that's the note to end on. Two great books, weirdly coincidental, and I found that really fun in a lot of ways. And it was fun to compare and contrast them. Not in a competing way, just in a interesting literary analysis way. What did you think of these books? Have you read them? You should read them. Go read the books. I've been reading a lot of 2-star stinkers lately, and so these were some cream of the crop. Unfortunately, I gotta read some good books. Recommend me some books down below. More Lady Night books. Are they like funny Lady Night books? Are there more, I don't know, comedy Lady Nights? I don't want like super fantasy fairy tale fae fairy tales. I can't do it. I've decided that I've stopping reading fae fairy tales. I can't do it. But Lady Night fairy tales, butches with swords, I'm interested. Femme princesses, butches with swords. Recommend me that. Please and thank you. Have a good night.